Hey gamers, I'm Giancarlo.
And I'm Felicia.
Yeah, I thought you almost forgot.
I almost forgot. And this is our review of
Egizia?
Egizia.
Egizia, I think, which takes place in Egypt. So why are you wearing a toque?
Why, there's no toques in Egypt?
In Egizia, players delegate a workforce to build obelisks, pyramids, and temples while managing stone blocks and food for workers. In the box, you'll find a game board which has the Nile River running across it, 4 player cards to keep track of workers and stones, wooden ships for each player, stones which will be used to build monuments, construction crew markers for each player, quarry start cards, grain start cards, Nile cards which have different abilities on them, Sphinx cards which are your objectives, 20 grave tiles with different numbers on them, 4 player sequence markers, a water ring to keep track of the rain or drought season, and 4 scarab tiles. The goal is to get the most victory points at the end of 5 rounds.
Here's how to set up the game. Randomly give each player a sequence tile. Each player, starting with the first player, takes a player tableau of the color of their choice. Place your construction crew tile of the same color on your tableau as follows. The Joker, the one with grass under his feet, on space 2 in the lower row, and the remaining 3 on space 1 in the upper row. Players then take the 8 ships and the 24 stones of his color. Each place one of their stones on the scoring track on the 050 space. The first player places it on the last place, followed by the second, and so on. Then each player places 1 stone on the topmost spaces of both the stone quarry and the grain market. 1 more of their stone will go on the stone market on each player's tableau. The first player puts 1 on 2, the second player on 3, the third on 4, and the fourth on 5. Each player then takes a start grain card and a quarry start card. Separately shuffle the 3 sets of cards with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and place them face down next to the game board. Shuffle the Sphinx cards and place them face down on the Sphinx drawn pile. Place the water ring on the middle irrigation space. Shuffle and place 12 grave tiles face down on the board, revealing the first 4 and returning the remaining 8 in the box. And finally, leave the 4 scrap tiles within reach to give a player when his scoring marker goes over 50. You are now ready to play.
Playing of a round consists of 7 phases which are played in this order, starting with the first player for each round. In phase 1, you lay out the Nile cards. In round 1 and 2, players draw from the 1-2 deck and place 10 cards face up on the board along the Nile from the source down. In rounds 3 and 4, they take from the 3-4 deck, and finally in round 5, they take from the number 5 deck. Phase 2 consists of placing ships along the Nile from the source down. First, players place 1 ship, then the second places his, and so on. Players keep placing them until all ships have been placed or can't be placed anymore. Players can never place a ship upstream from where they've already placed a ship downstream, so be careful when deciding when and where to place a ship. Round spaces and card spaces can have more than 1 ship in each. In the building area, you can only place 1 of your ships. Yet, even though there is only 3 spaces, the 4th player may put a ship next to the last space. This is called speculating. If one of the players before him doesn't build on the site, then he may do so, still giving priority to the other players. Next phase is to feed your construction crew. To do so, players have to add up the sum of their workers and compare, depending on the irrigation indicator, their total grain fields. If the water ring is on the first irrigation field, then only green fields supply grain. If the ring is on the second irrigation field, then both green and yellowish fields supply grain. And lastly, if it's on the third dry irrigation field, then all fields supply grain. Compare the sums of workers versus grain available to you. If your grain count is higher than your workers, then they're fed and happy. But if your worker count is higher than your grain supply, then you starve them and lose victory points. The loss of victory points is determined by the space occupied by your colored stone on the grain market. Next phase, you'll produce stones. Tally up the stones represented by your quarry cards. Add that many stones to your stone marker tab, but you may never have more than 25 stones. Now let's proceed to the 5th phase, building. This is the heart and, well, foundation of the game. If you have a ship in any of the three areas to build, Sphinx, Obelisk and Graves, and or Pyramid Temple, and you have enough stones and workers, then you may commence building. The players whose ship is closest to the Nile on the building space always builds first. In the Sphinx area, players may use up to 5 stones and workers to draw up to 5 Sphinx cards. They may keep only one and return the rest to the bottom of the deck. For every card they return, they score that many victory points. The Sphinx cards are objective cards and they are very valuable at the end of the game, giving you bonus victory points for achieving them. These are usually the game turning effect and variable. In the Obelisk Grave area, players whose ship is there can choose to build at one or both. In the Grave section, players must always build upon the first tile from the Nile towards the obelisk. They use that many stones and workers to take the tile, place their stone there, and move that many victory points. Also, for Graves, depending on how many points you've accumulated with them, there is a final scoring chart at the end to give you bonus victory points. In the Obelisk section, players always have to build from the ground up. Lastly, there's the Pyramid and Temple building site. Again, if one of your ships is there and you have enough manpower and stones, you may build here. The Temple and Pyramid also have to build ground up, but you may build the columns separately. The Pyramid must be built always left to right, but not all of the bottom rows have to be built. As long as 2 stones are there, regardless of color, you may put your stone on top of them in the upper row. However, having the most stones of your color in one row will give you victory points equal to the stones that you have in the completed row. The next phase is bonus victory point for cooperation building. If you participate in one area, it's 1 point, 2 areas it's 3 points, and 3 areas it's 6 points. Last phase is determining player sequence for the next round. The player with fewest points goes first, the second lowest goes second, and so on.
Egizia lasts 5 rounds, with the final round ending with scoring completed objective cards. The quality is superb, the artwork is nice, the gameplay, though seeming overwhelming at first, is quite easy to grasp after the first round. And if you don't, the rulebook has great pictures and examples that'll put you back on track. It even has a detailed description of all the Nile cards. There's a nice variety of special cards which are all useful. There's a lot of strategy involved with little to no randomness, which some players might like. We only wish there were ways or cards that could move players up in their positions from the stone and grain markets, especially the grain market. Seems like if you're at the bottom of it, you can never be penalized for starving your workers. Still, this game was a lot of fun, as most of the Rio Grande games are. They know quality, and Egizia is no exception. We give it an 8.5 stones out of 10 stone pyramid. Now get back to work.